Okay, we can go ahead and get started. Again, I posted something in the chat. Just a reminder, I'm recording. Um, so if you don't want to be on, then don't say anything or unmask your video. But you can ask questions, either unmute and ask them in general, or write them on chat as well. So. So question 5 on the canvas hunt. All right, so let's see. It's not like I have them. Okay, so the how to study effectively video is what is referring to. So let me do this. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'll share it to the Canvas site. So when you go on the Canvas site, I'll explain some other things as well in a few minutes, but I set up the landing page to be the home, okay? When you can go to a number of different places from here, and if you haven't looked at this, you should look at it and read it and pay attention to this. Like, here's the office hours, so there's an answer. Here's an answer right here to one of those on the Canvas as well, and on Canvas, the scavenger hunt, just to make sure you've come to this page. But I'll show you a couple ways how to get around. One is to use these links, but these links are very limited, right? There's only the quiz, the syllabus, the textbook, the supplement, and then how to complete lecture or lab modules. And certainly in the course, you want to do a lot more than that. But to answer that question, if you click on how to complete lecture modules, it takes you to an overview. And this is the video that's talking about. It's also in the lab module as well. All right, so question number 5, the student discusses, and I like it because, it's a student who is in med school studying physiology. So, sort of along the lines that many of you are using this class as a stepping stone for a career in some sort of health, medical, kinesiology, nutrition, some sort of therapy field. And so she discusses which one worked better for her. So obviously you need to watch the video, but that's where it is. So that's the other way to get there, is to go to modules. So just click on modules and scroll down to the overview of the lecture exam 1 module, and 95% of the stuff is also on the lab. So the one I previously showed you was lecture. This one's lab. So it has a few different things on it because lab is different, but for the most part, it's got a lot of the similar things. And so it's also here. So if you go to the overview of how to study for lecture or lab, that's the best place to see it. One of the things to tell you is that as I am sharing my screen, I can't really see the chat. So let me go through a couple other things and answer these questions. Studio is available to you, all right? I'll show you where. So that was, like I said, that one's kind of tricky. So let me share the screen again. But when you look at your menu, mine's different than yours. And the things that I have here that have the little like eyes with the crossouts, those are not available on the student view, right? Although it does, mine is Studio here, but you don't have one of those like I do, even though it's not out. But if you go over here to the left side menu and click on the little computer looking thing with the stuff coming out of it, Studio, you should have that. All right, so it's right below the inbox for your Canvas, and it's right below the Commons, and so it just says Studio, and you I was told you should have those. So you have access to Studio, and I don't know how much you've looked through some of the materials for the course, but one of the things you're asked to do later on in the semester, about halfway through, a little over that mark actually, is you're going to write a paper, and then you're going to take that paper and use that information to make a relatively short video. And so one of the ways you could do it on your phone, you could do it on your tablet. If you had a camera, you could do it. You could do it on Studio and voice over like a PowerPoint, sort of like the lecture lab stuff that you see there. So there's a lot of things you can do in Studio. A lot of people like it. I don't think it's that great for a couple reasons, but there are some nice little things in it that you can do. But I think that the drawbacks for our class, at least me using it, I think it's just easier to post things on YouTube. And one of the things is, I don't know if you've been around enough, and certainly they've done a lot of improvements, but like a year and a half ago, Canvas was out just for a week, literally. Nobody could use Canvas for an entire week. And so I am a little hesitant to store things on Canvas. And, you know, I don't go to YouTube all that often, but I don't ever remember an incident where YouTube was out. So at least you'll have access to that stuff. Although, again, there are some nice things about Studio. So as a student, you have it, but it's not in that menu. It's actually in the other menu underneath the DVC symbol, and you should be able to find it there, I would think. So you got it? So you can hear now? You guys are good? Yeah, if you're looking at the mobile stuff, I don't own a phone, so I can look at my iPad and stuff, but and I don't own a phone on purpose, but you know, I think there are some limitations I've been told from the Canvas app, or doing it on your phone through your internet connection as well. So if you've got the ability to go online occasionally, you probably should look at some of that stuff for that. This is the fourth question I had on question number 8 from the thing. And don't forget, I'll come back to the books and lab manual, and when we're done with might as well finish the scavenger one. So let's see. So here's the scavenger and the hunt handout. And so I don't know, the question was 8? Was that it? Which doesn't make sense in terms of that. Okay, so let me go back to that. So when we look at the scavenger hunt, oh, that's why I'm on, for the scavenger hunt one. Oh, you're not asking about the scavenger hunt, you're asking about the take-home one, that's why. Okay, so yeah, I'll get to question A and the take-home then. What question 8 asks is something that you might have learned in chemistry but probably didn't. And even though chemistry is a prerequisite, there's a number of different things that you don't learn in chemistry, or you don't learn it as applied to physiology. And part of the problem with the physiology stuff is some of the chemistry, we take shortcuts, and you know, it's not just us, it's most physiologists. I'll just give you a quick example. In chemistry, most of you probably hated molarity calculations, right? And they're kind of a pain. And you know, they're much more complicated in chemistry than we're going to have to do it. We're going to kind of do it one way, and you're eventually going to have to take a concentration and calculate molarity. And then you use that molarity to figure out something called osmolarity. And osmolarity refers to what's the pressure to move water within your body. Okay, so osmosis basically. So it's called osmotic pressure. Well, technically, it's really molality and osmolality, but molality is much more difficult to calculate than molarity. And in human fluids, they're close enough where we don't even worry about the difference. So, you know, if you are a chemist, you know, your chemists are going, no, you can't do that. You can't use osmolality and osmolarity interchangeably. But for us, we're going, okay, we're just going to do the easier one because it's close enough. So, you know, some of that information you might have, you know, found, so or been told, or maybe not, and told as reference to the course. So if I look at the take-home checkup, look at that one. The take-home checkup, hopefully it popped up on the, sometimes if, I don't know if you've ever shared screens on Zoom, but sometimes it doesn't pop up. There it is.
I'm sorry, I have a question. Can I ask it quickly?
Yeah.
The one you were looking at before, was that the scavenger hunt? Because the questions didn't look the same as what I had.
For the scavenger hunt?
The ones that you just had up before when you were saying number 8.
So this one? Can you see this one?
Is
that showing the scavenger hunt?
Is this one the scavenger hunt that you're showing us now?
Well, let me, sometimes it works, but let's go this way. I'll just come back in and out. So here's the scavenger hunt one right here. So number 8 asks about the 6 canvas icons.
Sorry. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't know what else was up then. That was something else. Okay.
Yeah. So for the take home, go all the way down. So number 8 of the take home is another example of information that you probably were told, but in a different light in chemistry than you will be in physiology. I'm guessing at some point in time, you probably learned that acids, bases, and salts are held together by ionic bonds. And you might have also learned that ionic bonds tend to dissociate. That means they break apart when put into a solution. One of the things we're going to assume, again, a chemistry cheat, is you might have gone even in enough detail in your chem class before to talk about dissociation constants and looked at those numbers. So as an example, NaCl, sodium chloride, right? That's just table salt. And because it's a salt, it's held together by an ionic bond. And when you put salt into water, 2 things happen. First of all, it dissociates, it breaks apart. And it breaks apart into Na plus and Cl minus. All right, so for every 1 particle of salt we put into a solution, we get theoretically 2 particles out, an Na plus and a Cl minus. Because they break up into Na plus and Cl minus, some people call it ionizing, more appropriately it's probably called dissociation. Those are polar molecules because, you know, they're ions, they're very polar. And so they dissolve in water as well, okay? So what this question is asking for, right, is what type of bonds hold it together. So if it is a salt or an acid or a base, right, it's held together by ionic bond. So looking at this list, right, if I said HCl, okay, so HCl, what is that?
Hydrochloric acid.
Perfect, hydrochloric acid, right? It's an acid, which means what type of bond holds it together? Since all acids, bases, and salts are held together by ionic bonds, it's an ionic bond. So when I put HCl into water, what happens to it? It's going to break apart into the H plus, right? So that's going to become H plus, and then the chloride ion is going to become apparent and the Cl minus. So this, when you look at it,
Same thing as you.
what?
Which one is this? Because
This is the take home, right?
Quiz
So go way
one?
up here, take home, one syllabus agreement. And this is
Yeah, that's
question
not what
number
I.
8 at the very end. And so it's on what, page 3, I think?
Oh, at the very end. Okay.
Yeah, towards the very end.
Thank you.
All right. So when we break that up, we break it up into H plus and Cl minus. So how many particles in general will be in the solution?
2.
2, right? So pretty simple. Now, technically, the dissociation constant for HCl is not 2. It's a little less than 2, meaning some of it doesn't completely break up. But we're going to make our life easy, not worry about those, and just say, we're going to say it breaks up into 2 components, okay? Now, this one is important because in lab 2, which you're supposed to work on today, we're going to, or this week, we're going to introduce taking HCl and dropping it into water. And we need to know what happens to it to kind of figure out why the pH drops. And I think all of you probably, if you thought about it for 5 seconds, you might not have thought about it for a while from your chemistry courses. If you put acid into water, the pH is going to go down, right? That's kind of the definition, one of the definitions of acids, right? So look at the second one, NaOH. All right, this one's a little more difficult, right? This is a base, and you might remember this from chemistry. This is called sodium hydroxide, right? Now, sodium hydroxide is a little different. When we put sodium hydroxide into a solution, it becomes Na plus, and then the OH stays together, all right, as an OH minus. That's called the hydroxide ion, right? And so what happens in solution is the OH minus grabs onto an H plus and removes it. And since H plus is an acid, that's why we call it a base. A base is, you know, one of the definitions is anything that removes hydrogen ion from a solution, okay? So NaOH will also, since it's a base, right, be held together by ionic bonds. It'll also break up into 2 particles, right? And you'll get 2 particles in the solution. So that's important. Now, glucose is a little different. I think most of you realize glucose is some sort of sugar, right? Carbohydrate. If you got way into chemistry, maybe you might even know in your head it's a monosaccharide. And if once you do the chemistry section from the lecture this week, you'll hopefully remember that. It's certainly the most important monosaccharide in the human body. But glucose is not a salt, it's not an acid, and it's not a base, which means it's not held together by ionic bonds. So when I drop glucose into water, it's going to dissolve, right? And that's because, and so you've done this, right? Glucose is just a form of sugar. You put sugar into water, what happens to it? It dissolves, right? It's still there, right? But it dissolves. So glucose doesn't break up. But the reason why it dissolves, it's held together by what are called polar covalent bonds, okay? And polar covalent bonds tells us, for the most part, things held together by polar covalent bonds are going to be dissolved in a solution, but they're not going to break up because polar covalent bonds are pretty strong and water's not strong enough to break them up. So a glucose, when we take a molecule of glucose and put it into water, it stays a molecule of glucose. So in this case, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. The other 2 were 2-to-1. We put 1 particle in, we got 2 out, an H plus and a Cl minus. We put 1 particle in of NaOH, we got 2 out, an Na plus and OH minus. We put 1 particle in glucose, it stays glucose, so we get 1 particle out, okay? So what about KCl? Well, KCl is just another type of salt, right? It's potassium chloride instead of sodium chloride. And so, you know, hopefully you're starting to kind of get the idea of what's happening here. So how many particles do you think we're going to get out of that? 2, right? Because it's held together by ionic bond. And ultimately, there are only a couple things you really have to know about this. So let's kind of take a quick look at that. So I'm going to go to a different place that I have all set up because I knew this question was coming. And this is page 14 of the lab supplement. All right. You all should at least have the PDF form of the lab supplement. And again, it's on Canvas. If you haven't found it yet, I'll show you where it is. Although again, mine looks a little different than yours. But this is the table that kind of talks about this stuff, and the information before it tells you why it's important. Okay. But again, the osmolarity of our blood is an important component. Okay. As an example, I think many of you understand this. I know not all of you are getting into a medical field, but you've all watched medical shows before. And one of the treatments they give people, like in a hospital, is they'll give them what they call like isotonic saline, right? And isotonic saline means it has the same osmolarity of blood. And if you gave somebody like distilled water into their veins instead of isotonic saline, then that would dilute their blood. It would cause water to go into the cells and your cells will burst. As a matter of fact, we're going to do a lab looking at that later on the semester. And it can be very dangerous and even life-threatening. There are a couple instances where people have died from those things, and it's much more common than you would think. But so what we care is about the dissociable particles in this case. And so I put this little table in the book for NaCl, KCl, CaCl2, that's calcium chloride, that's still a salt, right? And glucose and urea, right? I asked about the HCl and NaOH on that handout because we do that in lab this week, right? But these are the ones that you have to know for an exam. So if I ask something about this on an exam, I would use these 5 and these 5 only. All right, so we're going to deal with practice problems with these. And so if you don't understand, that NaCl dissociates into Na plus and Cl minus, and it gives us, hey, look, there's one dissociable particle, there's another, it gives me 2. If you don't understand that, then just memorize this table if you have to. All right, another common one is, let's look at, because we haven't looked at it yet, is another salt called calcium chloride. Okay, so if you look at calcium chloride, when you drop that into water, it breaks up into a Ca plus 2, right? And that has to do with how many valence electrons calcium has, and it loses 2 to become more stable. So you have this charge of plus 2. And then to balance that, right, we had that little subscript of chloride as 2, right? So we have a Cl minus and a Cl minus. So the number of dissociable particles is 3 for that one. All right, now that wasn't on the sheet, but that's something you'd have to know. Glucose is on the sheet. Remember, it doesn't break up. It's soluble, but it doesn't break up. And then the urea, which is interesting, it's lipid soluble. It's technically not, but we consider it by the way it behaves. It behaves like something that's lipid soluble. And it doesn't dissociate, so it's 1 particle. All right, and it's a little ahead of ourselves, and it really wasn't the crux of the question. But if you look at the last calculations in lab 1, there are 2 calculations that say, okay, here's a concentration of glucose, and we put this much in this much, figure out all these different numbers, and one of them is osmolarity. And the reason why we have to calculate molarity is osmolarity is the molarity times the number of dissociable particles. And so if you had a molarity of 1 for NaCl, right, and 2 dissociable particles, then it would be, osmolarity would be 2, what they call osmoles. But for calcium chloride, if it was 1, it would be times 3, and that would be 3. And for glucose, if it was 1, it would be times 1, and that would be 1. So you'll get much more chance to deal with the number of dissociable particles in the lab we do later. It's lab 7, 8. It's actually in lab exam 2. But that's what that's asking for, and that's where to get that data from. So this is page 14 of the supplement. The valence number is sort of like the valence electrons, but not quite. And that's to calculate something called equivalence. And equivalence is a rough measure of how well does a solution conduct charge. And the valence number, the easiest way to calculate it is the absolute value of the total number of charges. Okay, and again, you just have to do these 5. So Na plus, right, the absolute value, that plus, even though it's not written, is implied, is +1, right? And so that's 1. And Co minus, again, implied it's a 1. So -1, the absolute value -1 is 1. So 1 plus 1 would be a valence of 2. KCl, same thing, right? K plus is 1, Cl minus is 1, absolute value is 1, right? That's 2. CaCl2, be careful with that one. We have a Ca plus 2, so that's 2. A -1, absolute value is +1, so there's another one. And another -1, absolute value is +1, so that would be 4, right? 2 plus 1 plus 1, that's 4. What about glucose and urea? Well, they're so easy, they're difficult, right? No charge, right? So you look here in this area right here that I just highlighted for this one, right? There's no charge on glucose, right? It's a net neutral molecule. It has a charge distribution, that's why it's polar, but it's got no charge. So since it's got no charge, the absolute value of 0 is what? 0. So the valence is 0, right? So take a look at those, and I didn't ask about the valence number from chemistry because you've probably never done it that way in chemistry. You've used that term before in a totally different thing, talking about how many electrons there are in the outer shell and stuff, which is similar but not the same thing. So, and that's and kind of shows some more stuff about acids, bases, salts, pH, and things like that. So that's page 14 if you look of the lab supplement. All right, so hopefully that gets you there. And literally, I've answered 3 emails today about that. As a matter of fact, one of you sitting there, I've already sent that stuff to for the most part. So does that make sense? So HCl is not a polar covalent bond. It's polar, but it's an ionic bond. And again, just in your head, for our purposes, if it's an acid, a base, or a salt, it's held together by ionic bonds. If it's not, then it's going to be something else. Okay? If it's not, it's going to be something else. All right, does that make sense so far? All right, any other questions about the quizzes before I go on to the question we had about the books? Type them in chat, unmute, yell them out. All right, so what I'm going to do here, I'll have to do this. Too many things open on my screen. All right, so I'm going to go, and hopefully this pick it up. So I'm going to go to our website.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
This is more like an organization question. For example, how would you like break it up during the week? Would you like take the quiz on the Monday, and then like how would you usually do it? Like if we're face to face.
For face to face, we would do the exact same thing that is scheduled on the due dates. So, and I actually sort of, and I know not everybody would have this. I mean, if you looked at the schedule last semester, right? Mm-hmm. There's 3 sections in this that I'm teaching. One section would be 8 to 9:30 Monday, Wednesday, and then 9:30 to 12:30 Monday, Wednesday lab. And another section, which would probably include you guys because it seems like you're here at night, was 6 to 7:30 for lecture, and then 7:30 to 10:30 at night. And then the other class would have lecture in the morning with the one class, and then lab on Tuesday, Thursday. So I've structured it so when I said, okay, this week you should be doing these 2 labs and these lectures. Those are that would be the lecture material we would have in class for the most part for that week. So that would be what the assignments would do and things like that.
So the lecture you posted on I think it was S1, P1. So that's what we should be doing today.
Yes,
So
that'd
we
be
should be watching that.
one. Yeah.
Okay,
And
and then S1, P2, we should be doing either tomorrow or Wednesday.
or Wednesday, or certainly by Thursday, right?
Okay.
Just to kind of follow that up, if you do it as I've scheduled it by due dates, you
Mhm.
will finish, you will finish all the material you need to know for those little Canvas quizzes
Mhm.
before. It doesn't make any sense to take a quiz on material you haven't looked at or studied. At least in my mind, it doesn't.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can take it twice and see what it's like, but you're not
Mhm.
going to do very well. So, the idea would be look at the material and study, and then take the Canvas quiz. Now, for the Canvas quizzes, and I didn't put the actual dates on them, the days of the week, I guess, but I
Mhm.
think I made them, expire on Thursday. But really, I let you take them till Sunday, I
Yeah.
think is the time.
So the take-home quiz would be after learning this whole entire S1, P1, and then S1, P2.
Yeah, and that's why the take-home quiz isn't due until next week.
Awesome. Okay.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense.
And to be honest, the take-home quiz is a combination of stuff. Like if we were in a face-to-face class, that
Mhm.
calculator part of the take-home quiz, right?
Mhm.
We would have done that in class.
Okay.
Right. So in our lab, I would have given everybody, say, okay, we got a quiz, put your stuff away. Everybody in class would get the exact same calculator, and you'd practice with the calculator. And those 9 little things, and some of them are so easy you could do in your head probably, but I
Mhm.
just want you to get used to, punching the stuff in the calculator. And if you can do those 9 operations on a calculator, you can do any operation we have mathematically in class, because you know how to do them. And it's really just, broken up into those 9 basic ones. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, the last couple are examples of math we're going to do in lab 2 or lab 3 or lab 4 even.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I think if you stayed with that, we'd do it. There'd be a few minor differences that we would do, but for the most part, I'm teaching it and holding you responsible for what I would for a face-to-face class, and trying to keep the schedule very similar as well. There's a few minor differences, like I thought it made more sense just to have one day a week where you have some major thing. So
Mhm.
all of our exams or lab quizzes are on Wednesday, right? And
Yeah.
since we're not studying the exact same material, yeah, you know what? We're going to talk about homeostasis in lecture, right? I'm going to talk about homeostasis probably a third of the lectures this semester. I'll mention it some way, somehow, right? It is the central theme in physiology. If you asked physiologists, hey, describe physiology with one word, 90% of them at least would say homeostasis, right? There's a
Mhm.
homeostasis lab in lab 2, but it's looking at the water bath and how a constant temperature water bath uses negative feedback to maintain a set point. We're never going to talk about the water bath in lecture, right? So yeah, they cross over, but lecture material stays in lecture material and lab material stays in lab material. So unlike and again, I'll use anatomy because you've all probably
Mhm.
taken anatomy recently. In anatomy, when I taught anatomy, right, I did lecture and lab the same day because you're studying the same stuff, right? In
Yeah.
lecture, you're thinking about it, you're looking at it, in lab, you're usually doing identification. Like I would be surprised if any of you had a lab, at least didn't start out. It's going to be different this semester if you took lab online, where you didn't have some sort of identification, right?
Yeah.
Where you went through the lab. So we don't have that in here. It's going to be more mathematical. Hey, this is what happened. Tell me why that happened. Or here's an experiment, what you expect to happen. Or, oftentimes you have like a bad lab partner who says, oh yeah, this should happen. And it's totally wrong nine times out of 10. And you're supposed to say, okay, it's wrong because of this. This is what we expect to happen. And this is
Okay.
why. So since you're not being tested on the exact same material,
Mhm.
it didn't make sense to give the exams the same day. So normally during the semester, you would have a lab quiz on a Wednesday, and the following Monday, you'd have a lecture exam. Okay.
Yeah.
So instead, I just said, okay, I'll give you an extra 2 days to study, and we'll just keep everything on Wednesday for the online stuff. And also, if you look at the schedule, when you have a lab report due, which is a pretty major thing. It's 50 points, right? It's
Yeah.
worth 2 lab quizzes. Or your physiology paper or your physiology video, those are worth 25 points. They're worth a lab quiz. So I figure anything worth 25 points is fairly major. So those are all on Wednesday spread out through the semester. So you never have a lab report due and a quiz, you know, a major quiz or anything due the same day. So I think there's like a dozen of them over the semester. We have 16 weeks. So, you know, what is it? You know, 12 out of 16 weeks, you know, 3/4 of the time, you're going to have some major thing due on a Wednesday. And it just seemed to make sense. I'm sorry if your life is busiest on Wednesday, but it just seemed the middle of the week, that seemed the best day to kind of choose.
Yeah.
From that. So we'll do it a little differently, but for the most part, it's really close to what we do during normal semester. So if you stay with those due dates, you should be okay. And, you know, if you go by the due dates, you're planning for the unexpected, right? Somewhere, sometime, something's not going to work, right? You're going to have some weird thing happen. There always does. Your internet goes down. You know, they decide to turn off your power because of the fires or whatever, right? And you're supposed to, you know, finish something that day. Well, if you do it by the due date, then you still, in the most cases, have an extra day, 2, 3 to do that without any penalty. So I think doing it by the due dates will keep you there. And it seems like a lot of stuff, but you know, a lot of the busy work, it's not busy work, but it's the introductory material to kind of introduce you to Canvas, introduce you how the lab works, you know, get you to learn how to upload a PDF from an image and things like that. And so, you know, that's why we have a lot of this due so early, is I want you to be able to do that, because for every exam, as an example, you know, you're going to have to upload exam questions probably, or at least that's how I envision it happening. Some of it will be multiple choice, just like the orientation quiz you should have taken already at least once. Mm-hmm. And then some of it will be, you know, short answer essay, where I'm going to have a quiz. You open it, you get the questions, you handwrite the answers, you take a picture of it, convert it to a PDF file, and upload it back in a certain amount of time. And so the take-home exam is designed for you to be able to figure out, without the whole, you know, time part, right? For the most part, unless you wait until 11:50 to do it on the last day it's due, where you can figure that out. It's actually pretty easy. I'd be surprised if half of you didn't already have that app on a phone or a tablet that you could, you know, that you've done before. So some of that is just to learn some basic skills that will help you in the class. And the better you get at those, the you know, the easier it is to navigate. And doing that stuff, you know, I do that stuff all the time, where, you know, they're gonna, you know, school, because we're not on campus anymore, right? I've literally, since March, I'm almost embarrassed to say this, I taught all of spring 3 sections. I taught summer school 2 sections of stuff, and I'm obviously teaching now. And I've been to school exactly 1 time since like March 11th. So, you know, they send me stuff, and you know, I print it out, sign it, and then scan it with my iPad, right? Mm-hmm. Or, you know, steal my wife's phone or something, and then upload as a PDF and send it back to them. So, you know, it's a skill that, especially in nowadays, helps in terms of that. So that's what, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Right. Anything else with that?
I just want to confirm that I understand correctly for the due dates. So before any penalty, like for the one that's the scavenger hunt, it says on the actual paper August 26th, but we have until August 30th before we get any penalty, correct?
Yes.
And then the 5 days after that, we start incurring the penalty.
Yeah, and it's not always 5 days. Just pay attention to it, the dates. And sometimes it's like, okay, the whole idea of like the checkups for the little online quizzes, we'll just call them checkups, so it's easier to kind of know where the points go. Mm-hmm. The whole idea of that is to help you study and prepare for an exam. So doing it after an exam really doesn't help you any, right? Yeah. So, and you know, you can do it up to the penalty date. But again, if you live by the penalty date, if you say, okay, I'm not going to worry about that scavenger hunt until August 30th, and something weird happens and you forget,
Yeah.
right, then I'm not going to have any sympathy. I'm going to say, well, you know, I there's a car accident in front of my house and I had to go out and help people, and, you know, and this and that, and it just got so hectic I never got a chance to do it. And I said, well, that was fine on the 30th. What were you doing the 29th or the 28th or the, you know, and so on. So, you know, it's not a bad idea. And I always tell this story. A couple of years ago, I was at a staff meeting on a Friday afternoon at school. And if it's a good week, I'm not at school on Friday, right? Especially in the afternoon. And I'm usually our meeting's like 11 to 1. It's like 3 o'clock. And I had a student come up and ask me for a letter of recommendation, right? And I said, I'm never here. You're lucky I'm here. So when do you need it? Well, I'm taking it to Samuel Merritt today. It's like, what? Yeah, it's due at 5 o'clock. And it's like, you got to be kidding me, right? And so, you know, we talked about it a little bit. So I sat down and wrote not a very good letter. And, you know, he said he had to get something else. And by the time he came back, it was like 4:15, and he's got to drive. And I used to teach at Samuel Merritt, right? And on Friday afternoon, going through the tunnel, and this was back before they built the new one, the other one, you know, I don't know if he made it or not. So he never asked me for another letter, so maybe he did. But, you know, it's just, you know, try not to live by that and get those things done. So, you know, kind of dovetail back on that question we had. Yeah, that my suggestion is to use the due dates and have the penalty dates kind of in your back pocket if you need them.
Okay.
And so kind of as said, just to kind of be complete, the like the orientation checkup doesn't have a penalty date, right? You're supposed to take one today. Just tell me, hey, James, I want to stay in the class, right? So it's sort of like enrollment, really. And then you can take it a second time if you want to, just before it expires, which would be the 30th. And on exams, right, if you look at that sheet, there's no penalty or expiration date. You have to take the exams on the day that they're scheduled, things like that. But you know, for the penalty date up through 11:59 on that date, there's no penalty, right? So you have to hit submit button at 11:59, right? On 8:30 for the scavenger hunt checkup is fine. So even though on the announcement, I'll say I'm going to use the due dates for the announcement, right? But still, you know that if you have that sheet, right? And I posted that, if you haven't looked at announcements, right? I said, this is the most important calendar you need. And I posted it and I color coded it in like green, orange, and red, meaning green, that's when you should do it. Orange is like, oh, now you're, you know, up against it. And red, it's when it expires.
Okay.
That's how I envision that working. So try to stay with that if you can. So, you know, don't assume that it's going to be a penalty date or an expiration date. You know, look and make sure it's there and things. And you know, try to stay away from, you know, the penalty. It's pretty severe. It's a 0.5 point per hour. A 0.5% per hour, and that's like 12% a day, right? And so, and I don't do the calculation. I've programmed Canvas to do it. So, you know, if you're, you know, 3 hours and 1 minute late, it's not going to say, oh, it was close enough to 3 hours. However it keeps the time, I'm letting Canvas do it. So, you know, just try to get things in on time and you'll be much better off that way. Make sense? Any other questions with that? All right, so I have the DVC website up, and a couple people asked about the books, especially the lab manual. So to look at the DVC website for books, you just go to the regular page, right? www.dvc.edu. Scroll down and find library and bookstore underneath, right? So that's one link. Click on it. And then scroll down to the Pleasant Hill Book Center, right? Now, you know, technically, San Ramon and our campus are DVC, and we're actually Pleasant Hill, but most students wouldn't go, I don't know where Pleasant Hill is. And that's where most of you probably were for at least some of the time. So you click on that, right? And then up here on the left, hit textbooks, buy textbooks, okay? And come down to the campus and term. It'll just be DVC because they're not, San Ramon has their own bookstore now. Select department, bioscience, right? So just, use the pull down menu. Select course, we're Biosci 140, so pull that down. Select section. They fix these for us, so it doesn't matter. They're all exactly the same if you pick my name, which they spelled wrong, but that's okay. And then you say add the course and then get your books. And here are the books that they have, okay? This is the one that confuses everybody right here. This is the custom version of the Physiology Lab Biosci 140, right? And it has my name on it. I didn't write it. I didn't do anything except talk to the guy from the company and I said a couple years ago, I can't use your book anymore. It's way too expensive. And the lab book was like $225, okay? Spiral bound lab book on these stupid glossy pages. And I said, it's just way too expensive. I understand a textbook being that kind of price, right? And, there was a time a couple years ago where, I always struggle with using the best materials versus the cost of the materials. And so we used the Silverthorne textbook, which at the time was by far the best textbook on the market. It wasn't even close. We used this lab manual. The Silverthorne book was over 200. The lab manual was over 200. So just the cost of materials was over $400 for this course. It's just, it's just way too expensive. So that's why we made some of these changes. So one of the changes we made is I talked to the guy, I said, I can't use your book anymore. It's too expensive. He said, well, what if we do a custom version? I said, well, what can you do? And so what they said is we'll have to put it on regular paper. I think it's much better than the glossy paper they use anyway, right? And I said, he goes, what chapters don't you use? And there's like a chapter 10 and a chapter 3 that we don't use. We never looked at in the lab. So I said, leave those out. And so now we get it for, 92, what is it? 92.61. Oh yeah. So 92.61 over here. So it's still expensive, but it's not even close to what it is. And just kind of as a, can you see the lab manual on Amazon now, right? This on Amazon, right, ranges from 144 to 186. This is actually that book, okay? So, but why would you spend, and even used, right, it's 120, why would you spend 120 to 185 on Amazon when you can get it from our bookstore for 92, right? But this is what it is. It's actually the 13th edition of Fox, which gets really confusing because this is the second 13th edition. And this is from 2013. There's a 2000, I think it's 13th edition as well. I won't go into the story why he's got two 13th editions, but so you could buy it from Amazon if you wanted, but it'd be more expensive. But if there's some reason you did, I have not been able to find out if the bookstore is doing any shipping. So if you buy from the bookstore, their website seems to indicate you have to come in and pick them up, which doesn't make any sense to me because I've had students complain they ordered books from the bookstore and they haven't gotten them. So I don't know what's going on with that. But so that's the one book. That's the one you have to buy, right? And whether it's from Amazon like this, right? So Laboratory Manual 13th edition looks like this, right? If you're going to buy this from Amazon, be careful because his textbook looks exactly like this, all right? So make sure it says Laboratory Manual, right? And not just Human Physiology because that would be the textbook. So that one you need. The supplement is, and they haven't updated this, you can use the 2018 one or the 2020. There's like no difference at all except for the cover and like two little things that I changed. And you can buy this from the bookstore. It's 25 bucks. Here's an answer to your scavenger hunt. It's 183 pages long, right? Just front and back. And so if you prefer to use the PDF, you can download it off our website, all right? I don't make any money for it. I wrote it or put it together and revised it. And I just want it as cheap as possible, right? And so if you want to use the PDF and don't want to bother with the $25 version, or I won't, no questions asked. if you have a way to print it out for free, right, you can just take the PDF file and print out 183 pages, you know, front to back. So what is that, 92 sheets of paper? You could do that, or just use the PDF version, but you need that, right, as well. And then the last one is we went to this, you know, OpenStax Anatomy and Physiology textbook. I've been hesitant to use it because it's got a lot of anatomy in it, and most of the anatomy that's in it we don't care about, because theoretically you've already learned it. And some of you might have learned some of the physiology, because oftentimes many anatomy teachers teach functional anatomy. I know if you took your anatomy at DVC, they teach a lot of functional stuff, because I think it makes sense to do that. A long time ago, I was teaching anatomy at Sac State, and my first day I went through and talked about, they started with the bones for some reason. So the first day was bones. And I talked about why the bones were named the way they were and what they look like. And, you know, if, you know, like students get confused about coronoid versus coracoid processes and stuff. And if you know what they mean, then you'll never be confused. Coronoid means crown, or actually king's crown. And the coronoid process has, you know, there's a couple of them, but it has a little point on it. So it looks like a pointy king's crown. While the coracoid process literally means crow's beak. And if you hold the scapula a certain way, it looks like a bird's head. It literally does. And so I went through all that when I was teaching the lab. And afterwards, you know, the person in charge of the course, you know, asked me to go in her office, and she yelled at me basically and said, "We don't teach that way here." And I said, "What do you mean you don't teach that here?" She goes, "Well, we don't teach that naming stuff and functional stuff. They're just supposed to learn the bone names." I think, well, isn't it easier to learn if you have some sort of context with it? She goes, "No, just teach them the names." Like, okay. And it just didn't make any sense to me, right? So a lot of times in anatomy, you know, you'll talk about like epithelium, right? Simple squamous epithelium, right? It's easy to remember where it is oftentimes if you know what its function is, right? Hey, it's good for filtration, or it's good for, you know, reabsorption or things like that. Then it is easy to find, as opposed to, you know, hey, stratified squamous is good for protection, right? So I think that, you know, functional anatomy, you've probably learned a little bit as well. So the anatomy book portion, I just decided, you know, it's not worth it. This is almost as good as the Silverthorne book. Not quite, but almost. But the difference is you can get it online PDF for free for $0. And I think the Silverthorne's like $2.25 now. So it seemed like a huge difference for not a very big difference in terms of the book. So I said, okay, let's just go with this. And so I actually like it. I spent the summer reading most of it. And it's got some really good stuff. So to help with the anatomy and physiology and getting rid of the anatomy portion and emphasizing the physiology, if you look at the syllabus for each chapter that you're supposed to read, or actually each section you're supposed to read, I list not only the chapter, but the chapter and subsection of each chapter. So also, you know, don't just read chapter 1, read 1.1, 1.2, 1.4, 1.7, or something like that. So if you want to know where to read, that's in the second to last page of the syllabus, maybe the third or fourth last. It's underneath the lecture schedule. So that, but you can also get it on other places, right? So if you look, you can go to Amazon and get this. And just literally, if you just type in Amazon, OpenStax Anatomy and Physiology book, first of all, you can get an e-textbook for free. So the e-textbook is just Kindle. So if you don't have a Kindle app, you can download. I think most of you probably do. Just, you know, in general, it's one of those apps most people end up having somewhere. And you can download that for free. I like the PDF better than the Kindle, but if you use your Kindle a lot and, you know, you want to have it, you can download it for free. There's no reason you can't. If you miss the feel of a book and you like to feel it and touch it and, you know, highlight stuff and things, you can buy a hardcover, right? So just click on the hardcover. It's like, you know, 51 bucks from Amazon, or you can buy the paper cover for, you know, 42 bucks from Amazon as well. So you have, you know, whatever choice you want, but theoretically, if you download the PDF version of both the laboratory supplement and the anatomy and physiology book right here, then the only cost for books is just going to be, you know, by the time you got tax and everything, about $100 for that, you know, lab version from Fox. So I think that's probably the best way to go for those things. So does that make sense? Any questions about books?
So you don't know if the bookstore is like opening or shipping books out here?
I don't know
Like,
if they're shipping books. I would think they were before, right? So but when I looked at their website, when I go on their website, right? So we had all this. When I tried to kind of go through a fake purchase, right? All I see is a note that says, "Do not come to campus to pick up your books until, you know, you get an email saying your books are ready." I didn't see any option for shipping, right? But, you know, probably the easiest thing to do is to go ahead, and there's that number up at the top right there, 925-682-7363. Call them up during their store hours, which is probably like 9 to 5-ish. They change it for the first week of school usually. So 10 to 4 right now.
I think you have to email somebody, because I tried calling it, rang and rang and rang, but when I emailed, I got a response.
Okay.
They do give you an option to ship it. At least they did when I did it, but I ended up just, I'm going to pick them up in a few days. So I believe you can have them shipped though if you just.
Okay, so that was an option, but I don't see it on their site. So maybe when you check out, that's an option. So obviously they're gonna, I'm sure they're gonna, you know, add that cost to you for that.
Do you think I can just like walk in and then purchase right there? Or do I have to purchase online?
I think you have to purchase it online. Yeah,
Okay.
and then wait for the email. So, you know, I would, you know, do that as soon as you're able. And, you know, it looks like it's going to take them 2 or 3 days. So, you know, you might not, if you like order them tonight, you may not be able to purchase them until like Thursday. I mean, pick them up until Thursday or Friday, maybe.
And then when's the first day we actually need the manual? Would it be next week?
You can get by for the first 2 weeks without the manual probably. But eventually you want to use the manual to study, because the Fox book has a lot of good information in it. Background information and stuff.
I ordered just, you know, I ordered on Thursday last week and I got the email to pick it up today. So it doesn't take very long.
Yeah, I suspect a lot of people ordered books today, so it's going to probably be a little longer wait. But, you know, they're doing everything they can to get them out as soon as they can. To be honest, you know, compared to a lot of other colleges and universities, our college seems to have made a pretty good response for the pandemic. Couple other things then. For calculators, show your work. It would be like on an exam to show me how you set it up, right? So as an example, if you're doing an average, right? So one of the questions you'll see later is, we'll look at heart rates, and you're supposed to measure your own heart rate 5 times at home and do an average, right? So, you know, you should be able to, you know, somehow show, oh, I had 5 heart rates and it was, you know, this plus this plus this plus that divided by 5 trials divided by 5 equals a number, right? So that's what I'm talking about in terms of showing your work. How did you set up the problem when you calculate an RF like you do from the calculator quiz or Beer's law? Just show me how you set it up. And it's actually a good thing for you, because if you just give me a wrong number and it's wrong and I don't see anything else, like, I don't know how you did that, right? And I can't give you any credit at all. But if you show me a calculation that was correct, but somehow you got the wrong answer, and I'll say, oh, I punched it in wrong or something, so I'll give them some partial credit. So that's something to think about there.
And that would be an example of us taking a picture and making it a PDF and sending it in.
Yeah, but that would be, you know, if for like the calculator quiz, right, you're supposed to do that anyway, right? You're supposed to take a picture of it all and send it in. So showing how you set it up would help you, one, I think, answer the question more accurately, and two, be potentially able to get partial credit if you miss something. I'd also be very suspect if, you know, I don't know, the answer was, let's say 92.1, right? And I didn't see anything, I just saw 92.1. I don't know where that came from, right? Did you, because, you know, not, so don't take this personally, right? But I see some questions I and other students had gathered while reviewing, right? So I know you're already talking to each other, which is great, I think, but I don't know if you got that answer from somebody else or out of your head, right? And in a lecture setting, like in a classroom, it's a little easier to think you came up with it on your own. Maybe not always, but most of the time. But, you know, on an online setting, you know, you really want to show your work in terms of that for, you know, a bunch of reasons. So I'm going to answer those questions. So single lipids and lipid rafts are just a newer model in terms of what makes up the cell membrane. So just to let you know they're there, but that's it. So single lipids are very similar to phospholipids, and lipid rafts are also somewhat similar, function the same way and make up the lipid bilayer. But, you know, usually it's classically taught that the, you know, lipid bilayer is made up of phospholipids and cholesterol, integral proteins, peripheral proteins, and then glycolipids and glycoproteins, and that's it. And I'm just letting you know there's other stuff there. But, you know, if your question is this, would I ever ask you about those on an exam? The answer is no. So between lysosomes and peroxisomes. Lysosomes are general in what they destroy. So lysosomes are specific organelles that can travel around your cell and engulf and destroy foreign invaders, or they're also responsible for what's called autolysis, self-breakdown. So sometimes we have to break down and recycle old, worn-out cellular materials. And so lysosomes, that's part of their job, but they're very gentle in what they can digest. Peroxisomes are similar, but they're very specific, and they can only digest long chain fatty acids. And what peroxisomes do, this is where they get their name, is if you look at the chemistry section, fatty acids are made up of a couple hydrogens and then a lot of carbons and I'm sorry, a couple oxygens and then a lot of carbons and a lot of hydrogens. And so when we break those down, peroxisomes make H2O2. And some of you might recognize that. You probably have some at home right now, hydrogen peroxide. And hydrogen peroxide is deadly to cells. As a matter of fact, you know, why do you have it at home? You have it in your medicine cabinet to disinfect wounds, potentially. So peroxisomes are very specific in what they destroy, long chain fatty acids, while lysosomes destroy much more general things and have a much larger array of things that they can break down. But they're both to destroy things that are worn out or don't belong there. So they're kind of the same basic function, but one's a little more specific than the other. And vesicles are what peroxisomes and lysosomes are. Just have no vesicle is a membrane-bound packet, right? And really, vesicles become important when we talk about exo and endocytosis, right? So endocytosis is taking things into the cell, and exocytosis is spitting them out. And the way we do that is through vesicles. So they're just membrane packets. All right. So that answers those questions, hopefully. All right. Anything else? I just one quick. Okay, go ahead.
For I know you. So you pre-record all your lectures and everything. I know you have office hours, but will you like have schedule, like I can schedule stuff with you to have extra help with?
Yeah, absolutely.
Certain,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Yeah, the easiest thing to do is I just made them because I'm, you know, during the semester I teach at 8, and you know, 2/3 of the students would be in class at 8, at least on Monday, Wednesday. I just made my office hours early, partially just so I get up and get started with my life, and maybe it forces you to. But you know, if you emailed me, you know, tonight at 9, and I saw it, I'm not going to wait till tomorrow morning to answer it. Probably I'm just going to go ahead and answer it when I see it. It's not like I'm sitting at my computer there waiting for you guys to email me, right? But if you said, hey James, I'm having issues with this, can we talk? You know, we'll just hit a Zoom, whenever it's convenient for both of us. Last semester I had a student that was just panicking, and she sent me like 5 emails at like 1 in the morning, back to back to back, and basically I forget all the text, but part of it was, I'm totally freaking out here. So I just hopped on Zoom literally at 1 in the morning with her and talked about the stuff she was freaking out about. And it's like, she really had no reason to freak out. She really understood the stuff a lot better than she gave herself credit for it. So, we can do that. I do have some scheduled Zoom hours where I'm just going to be hanging out, and if you pop in, that's great. So, you can do that as well. Those are usually Monday at 9 to 9:30. And again, if someone popped in, like, today, I scheduled this from 7 to 7:30, knowing full well we'd go longer probably. But, if people have questions. And then because our major things are due on Wednesday, I also scheduled a Tuesday evening Zoom hours, and that's at 8:30 to 9, right? In the syllabus, it says 8 to 8:30, but I changed it to 8:30 to 9. I forgot to change the syllabus. So again, another key answer for your scavenger hunt on the homepage if you look. But you email me and you say, James, it'd be a lot easier if we talked about this, and that's fine. We'll figure it out. It's easy. I am not. I'm trying to stay out of this, but I'm going to mention it in terms of it. In the chat, right, you see, and the reason I'm trying to stay out of it is I'm not going to endorse it. I'm not going to not endorse it. I'm going to say in general, I think it's great if you study with other people, all right? But there is a study group, and they've invited people if you want to do it. And you have to join Discord, but it seems pretty well organized. The reason why I stay out of it is, especially at the beginning of the semester, is I don't know if it's going to be worth your particular time. Some people are great in study groups. Other people are not so great in study groups. Some people work really well with 1 or 2 people. Some people work better with, a hive type mind and a lot more. So, I would suggest that either do something similar or, hit up that one and see if it works for you. If it doesn't, then find something different, right? And use your experiences in the past to inform your future. So if you've never worked well in a study group, then it's probably unreasonable to expect you're going to work well this time. If you've always worked well in a study group, then you probably want to start making connections, and this is probably a great place to start. All right. So I'm not endorsing it, and I'm not telling you to stay away from it. But if I was a student, it's something I'd certainly look into, a little more from that. So, and the 2 people that I think were, kind of very important in starting this were on the Zoom this morning, and both seemed, pretty on top of things. So there's that. Anything else? All right. So one more thing I want to do. Show you. So just a quick run through of Canvas, just so you get the idea. Again, you are designed to pop up on your home page, okay? This is the home page. Matter of fact, here's one of the answers to the scavenger questions right here in this picture. The orientation quiz, if you haven't completed it, when we're done here, complete it, okay? Watch this video. There's a question from the scavenger quiz on that orientation video. Here's course information. Here's the student Zoom hours, right? Monday, 9 to 9:30 and Tuesday, 8:30 to 9 p.m. Also, just again, email me and we can hop on Zoom, pretty much any time. This is going to be the Zoom address for the semester unless something weird happens and I have to password protect it, okay? I'll try to provide the link, but this will always be the link. Again, these are ways to jump to other places, but I really think you ought to learn how to use the modules portion. Just a couple quick things about modules. Okay, so here's the checkup quiz. It's another way to get there directly. Here's where you would turn in the scavenger hunt online quiz, right? And if you've already gotten it, you've gotten it from there. Here's the take-home quiz. Here's another take-home quiz that's not due until October because it's to help you prepare for the lecture exam. So it makes sense that it, and I don't want to do the same week of the lecture exam, so I figured I'd just turn it in afterwards. It's a meet and greet and discussion. It's for you, it's not for me, to kind of look at how can you improve your performance on an online class. I know many of you probably last semester had some experience with it in one form or another and figured out some things that worked and didn't work for you and kind of go through that. And then I'm also going to post the optional Zoom meeting video. The one from this morning still was on YouTube and was 95% rendered and got stuck. I literally uploaded it at like 11 a.m. and I just checked it before we came on. You know, when it's ready, I'll get it. I might just redo it and see if there's some snag on it. Here's a lot of information that, you know, tells you about stuff. Here's the lecture modules, right? And you go through that. Here's the lab modules, although yours is going to look a little different because I have some stuff I haven't published yet. Here's the JLR, right? These are ones that you also should get done pretty quick. They're due what, the 2nd, I think, right? Really the 6th, but the 2nd, the first 2, and then the next week are the 3, 4, and 5 are due. And those are going to help you write a lab report. That lab report's worth 50 points, okay? So that information is all right here. Physiology Project, this you haven't seen on your end because I haven't published yet because I'm still working on that. If you want to download either of the PDF of the course textbooks, the OpenStax or the supplement, they're right here, right? So if you want to do the supplement, you just click on the supplement name, and then you could click on the blue name. That's a live link. It'll automatically download it. I don't want to download it. I already got a copy on my computer. But if you left click the arrow, then you can preview it or download it, or there's also alternative formats if you need those. Preview would just load it into the page so you can look at it. Since the supplement's 183 pages, I'm not going to do it because it'll take 10 or 15 seconds. Or just download it on your computer so you have it locally all the time. A couple other things in modules that are there. There's degree and certificate information. We're going to talk about this at a later date. I'm going to post it and be very specific about it. But all of you, maybe not all, most of you are probably eligible for a degree or certificate. And we'll talk about that and things like that. And you say, okay, why should I get a degree or certificate? I'm going to go on, let's say I'm going to go to nursing school, or I'm going to go to PA school. I'm going to go to graduate school. I'm going to go become a dietitian or something. Well, for all those things I just mentioned, and probably literally for every one of the students in the course, they're going to need to go on to another school, right? You're going to need to be accepted to another school. And how those schools look at acceptance is they're not going to look for who's going to be the best nurse necessarily, or who's going to be the best physical therapist. They're going to say, who's most likely to finish my program? They think they can teach you how to be the best nurse or best physical therapist or best, radiologist, but they want to make sure you finish their program. Statistically, over half the students that enter physician assistant programs in the US, over half never finish with a physician assistant's license. So they want you to finish these programs. And one of the ways that you can demonstrate you can finish things is to have a degree, because a degree says, hey, here is a body of work that you had to finish and you did, or a certificate. If you are not familiar with the Allied Health Certificate, you need 4 classes to apply for it. You need chemistry. Oh, by the way, you need chemistry as a prerequisite for this class. You need anatomy. Oh, by the way, you need anatomy as a prerequisite for this class. You need physiology, assuming you get through this class, right? And you could easily do that, I'm sure. And then you need so one of the micros, either the 119 or the 146, the 4 or 5 unit, right? And once you have those, you can apply and get an allied health certificate. We'll also talk about a couple other things. Probably the most important one, and this is from last semester, but I don't think they changed anything, especially with COVID. I don't think anybody was doing that. But if you're going to apply for an AA degree, which then just means you need the general education stuff as well as the classes I just mentioned, and there's a whole bunch of degrees you might actually be available for you in biology, depending on what your background is. But if you're not graduating this semester, but graduating next semester, and you apply for this early graduation before September 1st, so you're running out of time, then you get priority registration in that spring semester, right? So if you need one more class and it's a micro class, right, or something like that, that's pretty common what somebody would need. And for you want it to be, you know, if it's going to be a hybrid, you want it to be Monday, Wednesday afternoon for the lab, then you get first choice, or one of the first choices with the schedule. So by having scheduling priority, it's really going to help you in terms of getting what you need. And there's a few requirements there that some of you may not meet, but most of you probably do. So it's something worthwhile in terms of that. And, you know, we'll talk more about those later, but, you know, it's just something that to look at. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you a little farther down are these lecture notes from previous students, okay? The one set is from Isaac. Isaac's a tremendous student. He was a tutor for us. You know, I've had some really, really, really bright individuals in the past, and he is certainly, you know, one of the top ones. Super nice guy. And so he provided a lot of his notes, laboratory notes, and flashcards for the class. He took this, you know, last year, so these are pretty up to date. The only problem is if you look, his lab notes, he doesn't have any for laboratory exam 1 because he thought the exam was so easy he didn't need to take notes. But so he's really bright. But you know, these are pretty good. And then I have some other students. Sienna was taking notes for another student in the DSS program. So these are really good, and these will come very close to what we did. And then we have Elizabeth's notes, and Elizabeth was really good, and Deb's notes as well. So you can look at them. They're kind of different styles. Like Deb's notes, when you look at them, oh, I'll figure out why that's an error. I should be able to preview. I'll go back and fix those. But if you look at her notes, hers are kind of colorful, and they get more colorful as time goes on. Some students find the color distracting. Other students find it's, you know, useful. I remember, you know, a couple semesters ago, I student go, "Oh, I love Deb notes. I remember that question on the exam. Remember homeostasis was in yellow. I remember that." And the other people go, "I look at these and it just looks like all busy." So you can decide, you know, she's added stuff. So you can decide whether or not, you know, you want to use these or they're useful, or, you know, you just take your own. Theoretically, if you use the stuff that's provided, right, and take your own notes, you should be fine. But it's up to you as to what you want to do there. So it's kind of a quick tour of what we're looking at on Canvas. Yeah, so, you know, if you can get your health education, right, you can probably also get one when you're done in allied health too, as well. And the more you have, it can't hurt, right? And it's, so think about, applying for those. And I'll say this as well. I sent it out, if you've been affected adversely by the COVID crisis, which I find it hard to believe that nobody has, right? Then apply for that little grant. It's $500, and it's not a bad way to go. Look at that. If you need any computer equipment, use that technology resource sheet, and the earlier the better, because they run out of stuff. And if you got really crappy internet, you might be able to get like a hotspot from school. They ran out and they've ordered more, but they probably didn't order enough. So, hotspot is a portable internet thing that just put at your house. You can put in for those requests, and hopefully, borrow that stuff for the semester if it works out. Anything else? Anything? All right. So, feel free to email me. Feel free to email me and say, James, can we meet online? Not a problem. If you're running into problems, then ask for help. I know it's kind of a weird situation. We'll make the best of it. All right. So I'm going to stop the recording. Hopefully this